Okay. I really appreciate everybody coming here tonight, and we have a great speaker tonight. His name is Jon Rappoport. He's an investigative reporter. He's been an investigative reporter for about 15 years as a freelance writer at a number of different publications. He's written a book on the Oklahoma bombing and also on the New World Order. And tonight he's going to talk about the plan to defeat the New World Order. And that is, he's going to talk about, that is, and we are winning. We're not, we need to keep together and get more information out and disseminate that information to beat this pariah that's upon us here. Pariah. That's a big fish that eats everybody. Piranha. Oh, well. That's what you call a malaprop. It's a word that's similar to the word, but you don't use the right word. And that's called a malaprop. And that's what I just did. Jon, he's written two books. We talked about the Oklahoma bombing and the revolt against the evil empire, and welcome to the great boycott of the evil empire. And Jon, where are you? Okay.
How's everybody tonight? Good. Me too. Just a couple of announcements before we get underway here. Wow, very colorful tonight. How many people here know about the National Health Federation? Oh yeah. Well, right back there, there's copies of Health Freedom News, which ordinarily sell for $3.95, but Patrick has asked me to say that for patriots, they're free, and if you go back there, you'll see some on the table behind Gary Wade, who's wearing the green teal polo shirt. Also, Rick Santee, you want to stand up? Rick is a good friend of mine, also a partner. He's right in the back of the room in the black shirt. I'm writing a new book on a subject about health, and it's called The Next Health Revolution, Coral Calcium. Coral Calcium. I ran across this at an expo, and in the last month it's blown my mind on several different levels, but one of which is the interviews with people I've done who have been trying to attain better health, and that means they have stories to tell about getting up out of wheelchairs and also about just much better energy and everything in between. And I don't often make personal recommendations, but I definitely stand behind this stuff after a month of using it. It's from Okinawa, and it's Coral Calcium. And go stop by and see Rick and have a glass of water with some of this stuff in it and get some info. He'll be there the rest of the night. I may mention this again because it's just quite amazing. However, the topic of tonight is how to defeat the New World Order. And some people don't really know what the New World Order is. And then there are some people who deny that it exists at all. They say that basically the problem is not enough people are voting, or the problem is that people are too passive, or the problem is that people don't know how to read anymore, or they watch too much TV. And of course all that's very true, but it's just part of the real overall scene. So what I'm going to do is spell this out a little bit for you, and then I'm going to talk about how to defeat this New World Order, and then afterwards we'll take questions. So I'd appreciate it if you'd hold your questions until I'm finished, and then we'll get into all of that. Reason I'm so interested in this subject is because I knocked heads with this for 15 years. Every time I'd write a story and it was of any size, I'd always be looking at a monopoly. Medical monopoly, um, arms monopoly, energy monopoly, government monopoly, intelligence gathering monopoly. You can go on forever. Energy, oil, the whole business. Banking, ding dong, the bank is here. Hello. Can we loan you money? Can we give you money? Yeah. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because I'll be talking about money in a little while. So I began saying, well, who are all these monopolies? I mean, what is this all about? And the reason that I kept asking that question is because I had a pretty good education, but I never got educated in that. You don't learn this in college. We'll now teach Monopoly 101. You know, all about the monopolies. And it's not a game that you play on a board. It's not manufactured by Parker Brothers. It's real, and they are the guys with the power. And, you know, every college student ought to spend at least a year studying that stuff, right? In fact, if you go over here, Richard, you want to hold up your hand over there? There's one book that these guys have over here, which, if you've got any sense, you know, you'll scap this one up before you leave tonight. It's called the DuPont Dynasty Behind the Nylon Curtain. Happens to be the first edition. Oh, you already bought it. It's gone. Sorry. It's out of print. But the history of the DuPont family. Now we're talking New World Order here. Old World Order and New World Order happen to be the same thing. That's the first thing to understand. There's nothing new about the New World Order except that it's now 1996. And, you know, people die and other people kind of take over, but their agenda has always been the same thing. Now, the agenda is this: land, resources, and people that are willing to work for slave wages. That's been the case since you go back into medieval Europe, and you can go further back if you want to. There's a guy who lives on top of the hill, and he's the Lord. And he's got this big castle, and outside the castle he's got his troops. Got to have your own army, you know. And then he's got his court, people that dispense justice and hang around and eat the good food, get gout. And then he's got the peasants down there in the fields working for slave wages. So he's got power. That's the definition of power in material terms. Now, I'm not a person who believes that material power is the only kind of power, but I'm telling you that that's the way the power elites have always defined power. But there is no course in high school or college called Power 101. So people don't come out of school saying, well, at least I know what power is, and at least I know what the power elites think power is. I mean, that's very important, right? To know what the power elites think power is, because that's what they're going after. That's what they've been going after for centuries. And whether they're corporate or government or they've got some religious cover story, or they've got some military cover story, or whatever. That's what they are. That's who they are. And so the old world order and the new world order are really all about that. Only the means to get it and keep it and extend it, power, change as time goes on because the society changes and people come up with different strategies. And one of the big strategies, of course, is government. All right? I mean, what else do you want? We got this government we control. This is a sweet deal. And they allow a certain amount of freedom, and that's all well and good. And there's a certain amount of idealism in this government. That's good. But basically, they let us have our own way. And we pay good money for that. And have for a long time to the right people. And so we don't want to change the government. We think it's a good government. We don't care whether they're Democrats or Republicans or they're socialists or communists or conservatives or libertarians or Christians or atheists or, yeah. That's all cover story. All we care about is that when we come bulldozing our way through for more power, they just step aside. And they vote the right way when we need a vote. Okay. So there is no way to put this government together right without breaking its corporate connections. And I'm just not talking about PACs and campaign contributions, but the whole system that strengthens corporate profits here and overseas while making people poorer. And I'm talking about corporate welfare. I'm talking about the fact that Newt Gingrich's county in Georgia receives more government contracts than any other county of its nature in the country. So when Newt talks about free enterprise, he's got his tongue so far into his cheek that he's going to soon need some kind of surgery to get it out. You know what I mean? Right? Now, some people may like Newt for various reasons, but Newt has a face that goes this way and another one that goes the other way, you know what I mean? So he can go, I'm also Newt over here. And this is me too, Newt. Because without government welfare, those contracts to those corporations in his county, and that's all government taxpayer money, he's not sure he can get elected every time. So he's for that welfare. Welfare that makes what we think of as welfare like a candy store. This is now big time welfare we're talking about. Okay? So we've got to end that too. Now, the Republicans made some noises about that in Congress at the very beginning, you know, when they got elected. Yeah, we're not going to let these corporations Okay, now, anyway, what are we going to do here, you know? That kind of, where did that go? I don't know. Just sort of disappeared. Yes, the banks and the blah, 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 blah. Anyway, what were we saying here before we, yeah. Okay. Now, I spoke about this once before here, but I want to review this for you, because some people didn't hear it and some people don't remember it. But this is particularly important for a patriot audience. And there's some left-wing people that would like to tell you this information. I am neither left nor right. However, I'm happy to carry their message when it's any good, and in this case, it's okay. And because some of these left-wing guys came up with this, at least I think they're left-wing, whatever that means, you know. This is, I'm the left, and I'm the right, and I'm the left, and I'm the right. Okay, here's the deal. When this country was formed, one of the first things that happened was that the states passed laws governing corporations, because the colonists were just as afraid of corporations as they were of big government. I never knew this. Came as a shock to me. I thought free enterprise was defined all the way down the line as roll over anybody you want to, and, you know, and if there's a problem, too bad. You know, that was kind of the definition of capitalism. Capitalism makes money, we destroy whatever we feel like, and if you don't like it, too bad. That's kind of, you know, what I always thought unfettered capitalism was. But the colonists didn't think so. because they knew about the East India Trading Company, which was a British corporation that was very destructive in many respects, Hudson's Bay Trading Company, the, what do they call it, the Royal Africa Trading Company that was responsible for bringing slaves over to the New World. They knew about a lot of this stuff. They didn't like these corporations. In fact, several of the colonies were chartered as crown corporations, if you remember that phrase from school. And I believe Virginia was one of those. The Crown Colony of Virginia. And you say, yeah, whatever that means. Well, it means it's a corporation. And what's the purpose of the corporation? Is to drain all of the natural resources out of Virginia and get it back to England and get people to work for, you know, as little money as possible over in Virginia. That's called colonialism. So these colonists said, hey, we got to watch out for these corporations. So when the states were formed after the Revolution, they passed these laws saying, no corporation will exist in our state except by charter of the state legislature. And if the corporation does anything to seriously harm the public good, state legislature can yank their charter and kick them out of the state right away. That's what the colonists thought about corporations. Heavy hand. Okay? Now, this did in fact happen. There were sugar trusts, if you remember this, and whiskey trusts, and match trusts that were kicked out of states in the United States because they went beyond their state charter. They started to become monopolies. And Standard Oil of New York got kicked out of New York near the end of the 19th century because they were some real nasty people. And then they went down in New Jersey and they said, can we buy our way in here, please? We need a home. And New Jersey said, oh, no problem. This is Standard Oil of New Jersey that collaborated with the Nazis during the Second World War. So, that was the way the deal was supposed to work. Because the colonists were pretty hip people. They saw power as power. They didn't care if it was corporate power or government power or, you know, whatever. They wanted to limit it because they knew that these power elites were always looking to form monopolies of one kind or another. And the power elites don't care whether it's government monopoly or corporate monopoly or educational monopoly or info monopoly or any kind of, you know. If it's monopoly, they like it. Smells good. You cooking up some Monopoly today? I think I'll have, give me, you know, a short stack of Monopoly. And one for my friend here, too, because we're monopolists. Or, as these corporate elite will say, never saw a monopoly I didn't like. So, what happened to all of this fear and loathing on the part of the early colonists for corporate power? Well, it got corrupted by court cases, by corrupt judges, by all sorts of legislative over-cover, until we had one key case that everybody should memorize. 1886, Southern Pacific Railroad versus Santa Clara County, a dispute that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Santa Clara County and Southern Pacific Railroad, 1886. And the decision was that the Southern Pacific Railroad was not only exempt from damages, but that the Southern Pacific Railroad wasn't really just a corporation. It was a person. It was a person. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't seen many corporations walking around recently in one suit with two eyes and one nose. Haven't seen many of those lately. But that was the definition that was handed down, and it made a big difference, as I think you could probably understand, because the 14th Amendment talks about due process of law for each person. Now the corporation could say, wait a minute, fellas, we have our day in court. You can't just kick us out of New York. You have to give us our day in court. And by the way, we have 1,700 lawyers here. We have 500 PR people over here, and we have these newspapers we own over here, and these radio stations, and these reporters we bought off over here, and we have all kinds of things that once we have a court case, we can stall, we can do this, we can do that, we can outlast our opponents, we can do all kinds of things. And that's what they got in 1886. So the state legislature couldn't just get together and say, well, let's vote these guys right out of here. Okay, you're out. No, couldn't do that anymore. But that's what the colonists wanted, see? In other words, the first time that DuPont decided, let's see, I think we can put, we got 10 million gallons of this weird green stuff, and we don't know exactly what it is. We're sure it kills anything that comes into contact with it. Is anybody looking out there on the Chesapeake Bay down in Delaware? No, I think we're okay. I want you to drill a hole over here, another one over there, and just pump this stuff out, all right? Because we don't know what to do with it. See, and every year DuPont drills down 10,000 feet, if they haven't already got it all set up. They have these well casings that go down forever, and they pour this stuff down there into the earth. They say, well, there's so many strata of rocks between us and where this is that it'll never hurt anybody. And then it drifts around, and the well casings corrode because of this stuff, you go, psst. And then it comes back up again, and somebody goes, here's to you, mate. Next day he's in the hospital, and doctors are saying, well, we think it's thrombocytopenosis vitosis migravia portenda, and we're going to have to give this guy everything we've got in the closet. Like, take all these pills, because, maybe this is a new disease. Maybe we could get $1 billion from the federal government to research this thing. I think we've got a new disease, and I think Nobel Prizes are just waiting in the wings, right? This is what happens. And in 1989, DuPont put 259 million pounds of this stuff down these well casings. See what I'm talking about now? I'm not talking about whether you believe in environmentalism or not. Believe me, this has nothing to do with environmentalism. Well, I think these environmentalists are, I don't know. We're talking about 259 million pounds of into the ground every year from one corporation. And we don't know where it goes. So if DuPont had tried this back in, let's say, 1870, first time they decided to dump this stuff in Chesapeake Bay down in Delaware, they would have been called up before the state legislature, who would have said, what are you guys doing? And they would have said, well, no. What are you guys doing? Well, we dumped a little stuff in the bay. Little stuff? We've got some people that are buried down the bottom of the bay. We've got piles of fish that go up to, well, it was more than a little bit. Okay, we're going to take a vote. All those in favor of DuPont leaving the state of Delaware, raise their hands. Raise your hand. Blah, you're out of here 24 hours. Sell the buildings. Get out. We'll take over the property. See you later. That's what the colonists actually had in mind. Now, that may startle some patriot types here. Wait a minute. Well, you can disagree if you want to, but I'm telling you that the very colonists whom you revere, including the founding fathers, had it figured out the way I just described it. That's what they wanted. That was their idea of limiting corporate power. Okay? I'll give you another couple of examples and we'll move on, just so you may understand the depth of the corruption we're talking about here. Dow Corporation has a pharmaceutical firm called Marion Merrill Dow. They manufacture a drug called Clomid, C-L-O-M-I-D. This is an ovulatory stimulant for women who would not otherwise become pregnant. Now, tune up your brain and follow this. 7,500 women were tested on this drug before it was marketed or licensed by the FDA, federal government. These were women who would not have become pregnant otherwise. But on this drug, 2,400 women became pregnant. Amazing. However, 400 and something aborted spontaneously. That's like 1 out of 6. And then there were 24 stillbirths. And then the drug was marketed and licensed by the FDA. Because the FDA and Dow have a kind of cozy relationship. Government, corporation. New World Order, can't separate the two, folks. Now, if you were to take the Physician's Desk reference, which is available in any good library, the 1996 edition, and look up, and I urge you to do this, Clomid, C-L-O-M-I-D, and you just read all the adverse effects, you will be knocked right out of your socks. Because the pharmaceutical company writes this literature. So they're speaking conservatively of the effects of their own drug. And this is a conservative estimate of what Clomid will do. And I can tell you that it would take about 1.5 of these, very small print, to list all the different kinds of cancers that this drug causes, and the birth defects in the fetuses, including malformations of tissue and skeleton, and eye and ear, and genitalia, and everything you can imagine. And this drug is on the market, licensed, approved by the feds, and marketed by Dow. Clomid, C-L-O-M-I-D, Clomid, an ovulatory stimulant. Now, since I come from a long number of years as a reporter investigating these pharmaceutical drugs, and someone is saying, I can't believe that. I could give you 25, 30 different stories, easy, without even trying. How about 1 million cases of brain damage in the United States since 1954 from one class of psychiatric drug called neuroleptics, 20 drugs in one class called neuroleptics, like Haldol, Navain, Thorazine. Some people, well, they just give those to psychotics. 1 million psychotics? No. They give them to all kinds of people. 1 million cases of motor brain damage in the United States? And people say, well, the New World Order is trying to destroy the country. Yeah, they are. 1 million cases of brain damage. That's pretty good warfare, I'd say. Well, the plan is to have no guns, no weapons of any kind, no soldiers. We don't need anything except guys wearing white coats. And we're in great shape because we've got this one class of drugs. We can cause 1 million cases of brain damage without ever declaring war and make a pile of money in the process. That's pretty good, huh? I mean, that's quite a deal. No wonder they don't like alternative health. I'll tell you a story about a guy. Some people probably know him. I'm not going to mention his name. He was in the nut house back east when he was a kid. He was a little out of control. He grants that. While he was in the nut house, they began giving him these neuroleptic drugs. Thorazine. You're in a room with nothing in it except you and the drug, right? Days, weeks. Finally, you know, he starts talking to the psychiatrist. And basically the tune is, are you going to cooperate? Yeah. So eventually he puts on a good enough face so they begin letting him out on furloughs, and he begins investigating food supplements while he's on the outside. And he takes some and he feels a whole hell of a lot better. So being a naive kid, he tells the psychiatrist when he goes back in, and he says, can I have permission to stay on this regimen? Absolutely not. You take our drugs. So they took away his food supplements, which were making him sane, and they put him on the neuroleptics, which begin to do this to you. So the next time they let him out on a furlough, he bought a whole bunch of food supplements. He went back in the nut house. He made a hole in his mattress. This is true. And he secreted the food supplements into his mattress, which he began taking judiciously every day. And after about 4 months, he was sane. He had a chemical imbalance, but not the psychiatric kind of chemical imbalance. He didn't have a deficit of thorazine in his brain, you know, right? Yes, I can see the diagnosis here says you've got a deficit of thorazine, and no. So he then went before the psychiatrist and they let him out. He was sane. He never told them how. They thought it was their drugs, and he went out and he's going back there again, right? He knows about the New World Order. Okay. There's a report back there that Rick Santee has called Revolt Against the Empire. We have a few copies only left. You can pick one up for a couple of bucks. It does Dow, DuPont, and Monsanto, which are the three that we are now boycotting, called the Great Boycott, started on Feb 16th. We have an organization called the Great Boycott to put these people out of business by not buying their products and also not buying their stock. We meet the first Sunday of every month in Santa Monica. You can call my voicemail, which is at the end of that report. In fact, I'll give out the number now, and I'll give you the info on the meeting. 213-243-9005. 243-9005 in the 213 area. Okay. So what the New World Order is a bunch of power elite types who want power. They want land, they want resources, and they want people who work for slave wages, and they'll keep the world poor to do it. They don't care what they have to do it as long as they can have what they want. And they'll work through governments, they'll corrupt governments, they'll set up governments, they'll work hand in glove with governments. This revolving door that we've always heard about between government agencies and corporations has several purposes. It's not just to give people nice money when they retire from the government, or even to get them working in collusion with each other, although it does all of that. There's another big reason for it. It's so everybody gets to know each other, who the players are. So nobody's going to cop out. No one's going to stop working for greater concentration of power in this corporate government network. So you see, if we can defeat the people who want the power, there's a chance that we can reform the government and put it back the way it's supposed to be. The government is captive to corporate interests. The corporate interests are captive to the few greed heads at the top of these corporations who just want power. You know? Now, how many people have ever met somebody who from the time they were a tiny kid knew exactly what they wanted to do in life? Did you ever know anybody like that? Like a kid who played with snakes and then later he became a snakeologist, you know? Or somebody who collected coins when he was 5 years old and now, you know, he owns half the world because he's got all these rare coins. Something like, you know that kind of person? Clinton, yeah, exactly. Exactly. From the time he was 4, he said, I want to be president. All right? And they said, oh, that's nice. He said, no, I really want to be president, right? Really? Really? I want to meet John Kennedy. And he did. Right? Okay, exactly, Clinton. Now, there's some people, I met a guy that I hadn't seen 30 years one day at an expo, and we looked at each other, and we started talking. I said, I had lunch with you 30 years ago. We had a conversation. He said, I don't remember it. He said, but if you talked to me, it had to be about money. He said, because that's all I've been interested in since I was a kid, and I'm still interested in it, right? That was his thing. Okay, well, there's some people that are born who are interested in power like that. That's all they've ever been interested in, and that's their whole personality. And they don't care what they have to do to get it. And those people tend to rise to the top because they're so single-minded, especially if they're from fairly wealthy families to begin with, and they have corporate connections. That's what happens to some of them. All right? So I introduced the idea of a boycott on February 16th at Deep River Books and said we have to boycott these power heads and put them in their place by stopping to do the one thing that they have control over us about, and that's to buy their products. We're the suckers. It's real simple. They've got us totally bamboozled because we listen to the ads and we buy the stuff. And we don't even know what they make because we don't care. Because we don't learn about it in school. Because nobody teaches us anything. So we have a report back there, and if you call my voicemail, I'll send you out at no charge the one-pager that we have that spells out the products to boycott and what to do. And you can come to our meetings. I'll tell you now when and where, and then if you don't get it down, you can always call. It's the first Sunday of every month at 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. at the Humanitarian House in Santa Monica. The address is 1457 12th Street. 1457 12th. It's the northeast corner of 12th and Broadway. It's a house. 6 p.m. The only charge we ask is $1 for the house. I don't get anything out of it. And we do strategy on how to boycott these guys. And we're going to use some, you're going to take a page out of the book of some activist groups, and we're going to try to organize some interesting things. That's one of the biggest ways, and one of the only ways, I'm afraid, to defeat the New World Order. That is one of the only things that can be done, because the guys behind the guys behind the guys are making billions of dollars every time we go to the supermarket. It's not so much about some sort of satanic ritual, unless you think that Lucky's is a satanic ritual, or Ralph's, right? And there's some people who could make a pretty good case for that. Like, did you ever go into one of these markets and see a full basket full of stuff and nobody around? Or like in a Save-On, you go down an aisle and there's a basket that's full of like 1,000 products and there's no person there? They fled. I know people. They go in there and they start shopping and they pile one thing on another and more, and over-the-counter drug and this and that, and finally they freak. You know, the fluorescent lights, the whole scene, there's too many products, I got to get out of here. And they just park their cart and they split and they drive home and they say, whoo, I almost died in that joint, right? What level of hell is that, right? Right? How'd you like that? You go to hell after you die and it's like you see a big sign that says Ralph's. And you can't leave. You're always there, right? You can eat whatever you want, but you can't get out of that thing, that atmosphere of, you know, the products are closing in. Buy me, buy me, buy me, you know? And there's some guy sitting up there picking his teeth, you know, he's Satan, right? Saying, you're doing very well. Just make sure you pay the checker on the ass, and we're adding things up, and everything's going very well because we're roped in. But I know there's a big crowd in here of people that know about alternative health, and they've gotten off of this, you know, wheel. And they know about alternative medicine, and they know about the fact that a healthy population is something that the New World Order definitely does not want. They like seeing, you know, people that are like, oh, can I have like 12 of those Mounds bars, please? Like a case of diet soda to go along with it, because I'm on a diet. You know, and they're looking down through telescopes, New World Order guys. Oh yeah, look at this guy. If we could, is there any way that we could make, genetically engineer, like maybe, I don't know, 100 million of these dudes? Call Dr. Smith in here. I want to ask him a few questions about, look at this guy, he's piling, you know, this is their guy. This is what works. They're home free. But if suddenly that guy stands up and says, no more, now it's terror to those people. I'm going to buy organic produce. What? You know? I'm not buying any more of that sugar. No more booze. No more cigarettes. No more coffee. Ooh. See? We're getting down to it now, right? Everybody's, yes, I'm a patriot, and I've got this flag here and everything, and I stand for it. No more coffee. What? Yeah. No more coffee. No more of that tea either with the caffeine in it. What? Yeah. Get onto a healthy life, and suddenly all these corporations go broke. Because with unerring accuracy, they manufacture products that are bad for you. You know, they don't have any good ones. I'll tell you a little side story about one of the products of the companies that were boycotting Monsanto. They make NutraSweet, also known as aspartame, also known as Equal, also known now, the new name is Benevia. They actually changed the name of NutraSweet. Now, NutraSweet was getting a little bit of a bad rep, so they said Benevia, which in Latin means the good way, you know. All right, so I talked to this guy who used to design food, which is a kind of a weird idea, for a food processor, big food processor, Purina, designed food for them. And he said to me, look, you know what NutraSweet does? Makes you want more sugar and eat more food. I said, what? He said, that's right. He said, here's what happens to the body. You got a diet soda, right? So you go, I'm on a diet, I'm doing very well, I'm drinking my diet soda. Yeah. Now, as soon as your tongue touches that sweet thing, sends a signal, body is now expecting sugar. So it takes sugar out of the blood and stores it in. Okay. Going to get some more sugar, going to store this one. And then, where's the sugar? Nowhere. So now, you've created a slight hypoglycemic condition, low blood sugar. And what happens when people have low blood sugar? They want to eat and they want sugar. Right? So that's what Monsanto has done. Now, I'd love to have a debate with one of those guys. We never thought, that's, you know. Yeah. That's what NutraSweet does. Makes you want to eat more and have more sugar. That's why you see some guy that weighs 280 coming out of the supermarket, you know, and he's got, you know, candy and all kinds of crap and stuff in one hand, and he's got a case of diet soda in the other, right? And he goes home, he's watching TV, and he drinks a diet soda. I'm doing really well, and then the commercial comes, and suddenly he finds himself going into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator, and taking food out, because he's hungry. He's got to have some stuff, right? And Monsanto, see, I mean, this is the New World Order. This is Monsanto. This is one of the biggest corporations in the world. These are the people that are genetically engineering the food supply of the world, so that the crops that we eat will be able to tolerate more of their own toxic herbicide called Roundup without dying. Of course, we die in the soil and everything, but that's okay as long as the corn looks good. The corn is saying, give me as much Roundup as you want, I'm going to grow, kill those weeds off and everything else, but I'm genetically engineered to absorb more toxic herbicide, and I'll pass that on to the consumer. Right? And you're chomping on your corn thinking, gee, I don't know, it feels so good, right? And the guy who's the CEO of Monsanto is talking like Jesus Christ himself. He's saying, you know, he's talking like a Messiah. He's saying, we're going to feed the world, right? Yeah, he's going to feed the world herbicide, right? That's what he's going to do. So these guys are instrumental in the formation of groups called GATT, right? Got your GATT? General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs is by the corporations, for the corporations, of the corporations, forever and ever. That is what that was always all about. And Clinton and Gingrich and Dole and all those loons knew about it from the beginning. They knew it had nothing to do with jobs. It never had anything to do with jobs. Here's what it had to do with. It had to do with the fact that when Monsanto suddenly introduces in 1996 altered soybeans to the world, genetically engineered, they don't want anybody to know about it because they know that as soon as people hear genetically engineered, they don't want to eat it. Just like those people that know about bovine growth hormone don't want to drink any milk that has anything like that in it because it's a genetically engineered hormone. And that's why Monsanto threatens to sue any dairy farmers that just say BGH free on their milk. Like, there is no First Amendment, there is only the corporation. And the Department of Justice is saying, well, we don't know anything about it, you know. We don't want to prosecute anybody. Why? What's the problem? And the FDA is saying, you can't put BGH free on that milk because that would be a prejudicial statement. That's as if to imply there's something wrong with BGH, and we know there isn't. Meanwhile, all these cows are like, you know, can't reproduce, and the data about these cows is suppressed by the FDA, and the farmers who say to Monsanto, excuse me, you wanted me to participate in the testing of this, and I'm giving you my data about these cows getting sick and more infections and more antibiotics, and won't you take my data? And Monsanto says, no, we don't want that data. Thank you very much. Go away. It's a new world order. So what the GATT is going to do right up the line here is to try to pull another power play, and that is to make it a rule that you can't label any food genetically engineered. So you go to the market and you go soybean A, soybean B, you know, like looking, yeah, I don't know. And there's even the possibility, if we don't watch out, that some of those soybeans could be called, anybody got a guess? Organically grown, thank you very much. Genetically engineered, but organic, right? All natural, but machine made. We put the gene from a toad and a fly and a praying mantis into this soybean so that it would be able to tolerate more of our own herbicide. But then some of these we're not going to spray the herbicide on, so we can just call it organic. Exactly. Which organ did it come from, right? This is what they've got in store. This is what GATT is all about. And then they can begin to patent, of course, which they've already done these things. They can patent the food. They can patent the mice that they genetically alter. And eventually, you know, I'll be speaking at the Granada Forum in the year 2005, and I'll say, how many people in the audience are patented? Right? Hey, I'm patented. Who owns you? DuPont. And who owns you? Monsanto. Where did you come from? I came from a lab in Maryland. How are you? Right? And then you say, well, I thought you were a human being. No, not a human being. Sure. They're going to patent the clouds, you know. Well, that's our cloud up there. You try to mess with that cloud, we'll have you thrown in jail. And since we run GATT, that's an international organization, hey, there's nowhere to go to. You know, there's nowhere to escape. So this is what they have in mind, see? Now, it's all very well to say we have to return to the Constitution and the government is corrupt, and if we just fix that, everything will be okay, because it's partially true, but it ain't the whole story by any stretch of the imagination, see? And people who say the New World Order doesn't exist are usually lying through their teeth because they know about the corporate scene. They understand that. So when George Bush said, you know, made the famous statement, the Gulf War, and said there is now a new world order and we will go in where necessary to what was he talking about? He's talking about oil. Right? I mean, everybody knew at the time. They just sort of brainwashed themselves a little bit and said, I guess it's not the oil because the New York Times doesn't agree with me. Of course, it's the oil, you know. In other words, we can go in there and we can protect the oil for the corporations anytime we want to, and that's the New World Order. Thank you very much. And now, looks like we can rope a lot of nations to supply troops, and everybody will cooperate internationally to protect the multinational corporations. And this is a new era of cooperation. Therefore, we'll call it the New World Order. And I don't think he ever would have used that phrase if he knew, you know, what was going to come down as a result of just that little, you know, 3-word thing. But that's what he meant. That's what he meant. He meant, we will protect the power. And every country will cooperate and protect the power, otherwise we will not allow them into our councils. They will not be a significant player on the world scene. This is the New World Order. Let me give you another version. The Cold War. Well, we didn't fight Russia, and they didn't fight us, and not really. So we had a good 40 years of billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent in the United States on government contracts to defense contractors. And what really was the end result when you look back on it was an incredible amount of research and development on electronics and weaponry systems and all sorts of doodads having to do with advanced electronic, mostly computer and electronic technology. And what happened to all that technology that the government developed at taxpayer expense? Well, give it to anybody, but mostly give it to corporations. No charge, folks. No charge. Wow. So the deal on that is that the actual price tag on that research and development was very high. Not the kind of thing that a multinational corporation would like to foot the bill for all alone, believe me. No way. Very expensive. Very long term. Hey, we got a fabulous idea. See, this is what we do. We declare an undeclared war on Russia. Okay? Of course, the power elites that really are involved here, the corporate power elites, they're not Russian, they're not American, they're not anything. They're aliens. I mean, you know, they're just after power. They don't belong anywhere. And we'll get all this R&D done, and we'll have this fabulous technology, and then we'll take it for nothing. Hey, I think that's a good game. And I think we can keep the country pretty much, you know, saluting the flag as we want them to salute the flag, not as they want to, for quite a long time. And we can raise our flags up the pole, and they'll salute them, and they'll go along with this whole thing. And it became clear to more and more players as time went by what was really happening here was this was a bamboozling bonanza for the multinational corporations, the whole Cold War. Fabulous. Called the New World Order, called power, called the power elite, called government/corporations. Okay? Now, to defeat this kind of structure, if people are not willing to boycott products, it's very difficult. If people are not willing to boycott stock, it's very difficult. On the other hand, think of the trouble that could be caused. You own a gigantic corporation, okay? And every big institution in the world is buying your stock as part of its portfolio. The University of California system, the University of Arizona system, mutual funds, pension funds, union pension funds, everybody's buying your stock, see? You're happy, 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 happy. Because you've got money, 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 right? Everything is going just fine, and then one day a whole bunch of people say, don't buy that stock, these guys are bad. And let's say that enough people say it, and suddenly on college campuses, students start demanding of the administration to reveal what is in their portfolios, and then to divest, disinvest in those stocks. Woo! And pretty soon investors begin to get the idea that these stocks may not be as stable as they thought, even though they're very blue chip, and so they stop buying them, and people that have them start to unload them. Right? All kinds of nasty things can happen in brokerage houses and on the floor of the trading exchange. And we're talking revolution here, folks. That's what I'm talking about. No guns are necessary. This is a revolution. Now, I know that for some of you, this is sort of, I haven't heard about this one before. No. The coffee thing, I understand. The NutraSweet, yeah, but this thing, I don't know. It's a little new wrinkle. Okay, come to one of our meetings. Get used to it. Think about it. I have to tell you a very funny story, see, because the guys on the left say, this is a left issue. These people on the right, these patriots, they wouldn't know anything about this, right? So I go on the Tom Valentine show, and we do like an hour and a half on this, because he knows all about this stuff. He's a very hip guy. And I say, well, I got this report, Tom. It's called Revolt Against the Empire. It's all about these 3 corporations in the United States we're boycotting. He says, okay, give out your number and address. How much is it? I said, $8. I'll send it to you, whatever. Go down to my post office box 2 days later. Boom! Right? Boom! The best response that I've gotten from anything that I've done is from his audience. We're talking health freedom people, patriot people, people that are very dissatisfied with the government, people who want to shrink down the size of federal power in Washington. All of those types who listen to his show responded the best. Unfortunately, I go talk to a left-wing crowd or whatever, you know, and it's like, yeah, right on, baby, and we got to take those corporations down. I don't know. I think maybe they're too hooked on NutraSweet, something like that, right? The brain is like, right? And down in Orange County, I was on a radio show, and I talked to some people down there. I don't know. Hey, you guys are supposed to be smart down there. I don't know. Corporations, I don't know. Ayn Rand, I don't know. Saying, no, wait a minute now. So you kind of got to get your head into, for some people, it's getting your head into a different place here. But see, as a health reporter for 15 years, because I've been on that track for a long time, I kept making notes on the side, on my arms, and my head about toxic this, and they make this thing, and that's toxic, and the pesticides, and drugs, and industrial waste, genetically engineered food, and people are getting sick and dying, and they're calling it a disease when it's really chemical poisoning, and da-da-da-da. And finally, I had to say, well, wait a minute. Who's manufacturing this stuff? Isn't that important? Let's get the names and the corporations and the products, and that's what's in that report. It's lined up by corporation. Let's do it that way. Now, I was very encouraged by what I saw in the Patriot movement in this respect. What was happening, to my way of thinking, was a partial boycott of federal power in Washington. It was like saying, no, we don't want that. We're not going to support it. And all these people running around talking about sovereign citizenship and setting up their own court system and all of that. I said many times, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not an expert on it, but what you're saying to me is very inspiring, because basically you're saying, we're boycotting that. We don't want that court system. We don't want that money system. We don't want that Federal Reserve thing. We don't want that form of citizenship. We don't want that kind of power. And whether the solutions that are currently circulating are the best solutions or medium or whatever they are, to me is not the important point. The important point is the motivation, what's behind it, what people are trying to say. And that's really a major thing which I try to express in the book, Oklahoma City Bombing, and I think most people that were of goodwill understood exactly where I was coming from. It was only a few people that had their own personal axes to grind who were trying to say that was some kind of, you know, I mean, the guy, I think he's a bit of a racist, you know. Yeah, sure, I'm a racist, right? You want to read it that way? Great. Have yourself a ball. My point has always been that the Patriot movement is too various and different and wide-ranging for anybody to be able to summarize it in a second or a minute or an hour or a day. Because I've met a lot of people and talked to a lot of people. And I know there are people involved with militias, there are people not involved with militias. There are people who own guns, there are people who don't own guns. There are people who are tax resistors in one form or another, and there are people who pay their taxes. There are all kinds of people. But the basic motivation that they seem to be sharing is that they are trying to strategize ways of boycotting what we now know as continuing federal power in Washington, regardless of who the administration is or what the decade is. It goes on, right? It just keeps on going. And there are a lot of pundits around who've been talking about, the FDA, the CIA. I love the CIA. Well, the CIA, you see, and some guy comes along, patriot, and says, yeah, let's get rid of it. Well, wait a minute. I'll be out of a job. I got a university gig. I write books on the CIA. If the CIA doesn't exist, how am I going to make a living? So in a lot of ways, the Patriot movement has undercut a lot of intellectuals to the point where they get kind of teed off. See, they say, well, all those ignorant people that just want to outlaw these evil institutions, I want to write about it, Don't make me go broke. But another thing which, patriots have been right up there on is understanding the corruption of federal cops. I don't care who you call them, which agency. We're talking about the corruption of federal cops. And as I keep pointing out to audiences, and some people get it and some people don't, I mean, who is the leftiest of the leftist left lawyer that you ever heard of in the United States in the last 30 years, right? Kunstler. Okay, well, I heard Kunstler say to a group of people in Oakland, a black audience, you have the right to defend yourself against the police, one, and two, there should be no federal FBI in this country, right? This is the leftiest of the left, right? He said there should be no FBI. There's no reason for there to be an FBI. He said, okay, they keep the lab and they keep with a fingerprint thing and that's it. Otherwise they don't exist, right? And then came, what's his name? Who's the guy? No, the guy out of the lab. Remember he came forward out of the FBI. He's like a FBI lab guy, PhD, who suddenly said they were cooking evidence in all these cases in the lab. Came forward in the Oklahoma City bombing case, came forward in the OJ case. So you can probably forget about the lab too. So, let's give the Patriot movement in all of its aspects its proper due. And there are disagreements that I've had with some people in the Patriot movement about certain things, and I have some ideas that I think that would make the Patriot movement at large more effective, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I mentioned to this audience the last time I was here, which was early in February, I believe, that I know from researching some things about the Patriot movement that there are people who call themselves patriots, who call themselves militia, who believe that some races are superior to others and some religions are superior to others. And in fact, they have a whole metaphysics about that. I mean, they got stories that won't quit about blue-eyed, blonde Hebrews from Northern Europe, and the United States is the promised land and whatever. And what I'm saying is that people in the Patriot movement who believe in the Patriot movement, who want to inform the public at large about what the Patriot movement actually is, have to be very clear on points like that. They have to say what they really believe, and I happen to think that if everybody did say what she believed, you would see a total discreditation of anybody in the Patriot movement that has any racial or religious axe to grind whatsoever, that those people would recede into the background, and that they only have power because, as usual, many people are silent on this whole business. and that if people would speak forward, we would soon see that the real agenda of the Patriot movement has to do with other things. Freedom, for example. Yeah, like freedom, exactly. And like the coexistence of different people living different lives next to each other, attaining greater levels of self-sufficiency and also of community, which is what I want to talk about now. And this is very important because, as I think most of us know, the public at large is being fed what the media wants it to know about the Patriot movement. And so if I'm a reporter for a big city newspaper and I have a choice of talking to somebody like Ann Winner, who makes a lot of sense, or I can go up into down into Arizona and find some guy that's going to tell me that God made a mistake in creating the black race and he fixed it up when he got to Adam, who am I going to talk to for a great story? No question about it. That's where I'm going to go, and that's the story I'm going to get. And so for those who say, well, there's just some people that, believe that, and what can you do, and da-da-la-da, and diddle-a-dee. No. I don't think so. I think it's the responsibility of people who call themselves patriots to make their position very clear about what that's all about, what freedom is, what we're talking about here, and what we're not talking about. And that way, the cards are on the table. And I think that there's a lot of improvement that can be done in that area. And part of the reason that it doesn't happen is because in many groups, there are people who have racist views, very deep-seated. And so there's a thing, well, I don't want to disturb that, and as long as we can agree on certain other things, let's leave that, and da-da-da. But you see, every political movement comes to a certain point where they know that if they're going to be more effective and widespread, they're going to have to do some house cleaning, and they're going to have to look at their own beliefs and make them very clear to people. It's okay to be a renegade kind of on the fringe situation, but when you want to make the fringe be the most important thing, then more expression is needed, more cards on the table, more honesty, more truth, so that everybody is coming from a place of more total honesty, which gives you a kind of power that nobody in any corporation ever knew, ever experienced, ever understood in their lives, and never will. And that's the kind of power that comes from honest conviction within one individual. And that is a very beautiful thing. And that is something that everybody has, potentially, and something that needs to be talked about. So aside from a boycott, what else needs to be done to defeat the New World Order? Decentralization of power. Major, major issue that is not well understood by many people because it has so many ramifications. Because some people say when you decentralize too much, what you get is you get tribes and clans and people who want to kill each other all the time. And you go to Bosnia and you see that, and you go to other places in the world, and they can make a pretty good case for that. But what I'm talking about is responsible decentralization. And I'll give you an example. It blew my mind. I wish I had some samples that I could show you because it's very graphic. I've mentioned this before. There's a guy in Ithaca, New York named Paul Glover. He used to live in L.A. And he began printing his own money in Ithaca, New York. Ithaca hours is what they call these bills. Now, this guy is not right and he's not left. He's a little more left than he's right, but he's not really any of those things. He's interested in the community of people that live up in Ithaca. That's what he's interested in. And he's a very smart guy. He walked across the country from Boston to San Diego once, and I asked him, what'd you do that for? He said, well, I wanted to get some idea of the real dimensions of the country. I said, well, I guess you really wanted to do that, right? He said, yeah. He said, I walked across the country. So he started printing his own money. Now, it turns out, as far as anybody can tell, it's absolutely legal, and they have a letter from the IRS saying, hey, as long as you don't pass this money across state lines, it's legit. And of course, if quote, professional services are exchanged, you have to pay taxes on that, whatever that means. Okay, but it wasn't like we're shutting you down. Okay, now this guy prints a newspaper every couple of months in Ithaca, shows people saying, my life has changed since I started using Ithaca Hours, right? They got their own money with their own people on it. They got one with like a lizard on it, you know, and the different bills and different denominations. And he swears that it's harder to counterfeit than U.S. money. And he said to me, he said, we got 2,000 now, people and businesses that will accept this money, including a bank, right? So I said, well, how much of your life do you run off of this money? He said, 80%. I said, well, give me an example. He said, I pay my rent in it. I said, how does that work? He said, well, the landlord takes my money, and he goes to 2 carpenters that he knows who will accept the money, and he gives it to them, and they build additions onto his buildings. And the carpenters take the money, and they go to local farmers, and they buy produce. He said, we go to these local farmers, and we say, look, we want to eat your food because you're part of the community. We don't want to order all this produce from California shipped out here. It's, you know, ridiculous. And they say, well, we like that idea. I say, okay, well, you got to take our money. And they go, what's this? You know, what am I going to do with this? And they say, well, we'll tell you. Do you like to go bowling? Do you eat at restaurants? Do you want to buy food in this market, that market? You want to get your hair cut? You want to go here? You want to go there? You want to do this? The money's good. There's a guy named Johnny Liberty up in Oregon, prints his own money. Now, what's happening with these people? They are decentralizing power. They are off Federal Reserve dollars, not by just saying we don't like the Federal Reserve, but by printing their own money. Now, what Johnny Liberty told me was, and I hope this tape gets out to a lot of people in the Patriot movement, because I think this is a very fertile territory for this. So really, anything you can do, anybody here, to just get this info out. If you contact me at my voicemail, I'll give you Paul Glover's phone number. You can talk to him and find out exactly how this works. He has a pack that he'll send to you that describes exactly how to set up the system. He'll coach you through it. It's doable. It's not mysterious. Johnny Liberty told me, and he got his system from Paul Glover. He said, during the Depression in the United States, there were 1,500 local currencies printed in the United States. I said, where's that history? Yeah. Do you think maybe some of these corporate power elites decided, along with the Federal Reserve guys, they didn't want to put this in the textbooks for little kiddies to find out about in the 6th grade? Mrs. Smith, can we print our own money? And she says, okay. Well, I got a good design, right? So you can imagine what happened. Here you got the Depression, right? Roosevelt closes down the banks. He says the country's broke, the money's no good, and everybody's out of a job. And then you go into some Midwest community, and there's a bunch of people sitting around talking about this. 20 people, and somebody says, how many people had their land foreclosed? You know, like 8 people raise their hands. Okay. How many people are still growing food on their land? 7 people raise their hands. How many people are able-bodied, able to work? 20 people raise their hands. Guy says, well, I don't think we're poor. Now, they might be poor in Washington. Franklin Roosevelt might be poor. The banks might be poor right now, or whatever. The money might be lousy, but that doesn't have to be our money. It doesn't have to be our poverty. We don't have to be poor. All we have to do is snip the little cord and start printing our own money and use it as a medium of exchange among ourselves in our community so that we have a way of keeping score and we can all survive and do just great. And apparently about 1,500 groups came to that decision all over the country, and that's what they did. This is killer stuff. I hope you appreciate what we're talking about here, because why can't we have Why can't we have militia of Montana money? Why can't we have Michigan militia money? Why can't we have a Patriot group of Leavenworth, Kansas money? Why can't we have all of those things, see? Yeah. Got it? It's workable. It's very, very workable. Now, here's what I mean by responsible decentralization. You're not saying to everybody else in the world, we hate you and we want to get away from you. Not at all. You're saying we want to have a more helpful, successful, loving community of people. Now, we stand as an example. We'll show you how our system works. We're not defecting from the United States. We're not saying that we want to be no part of America any more than if I live in a house up on a hill somewhere, that automatically makes me secede from the United States of America. Well, maybe the United States of America, depending on how you define that, but America? No. Like, you can make it be that. You can make it be very exclusionary and make people want to come after you, you know. You can do that. We're going to be here, and we want no part of any of you, and and, you know, pretty soon people start, what are they doing over there, you know? Not at all. They're not doing that in Ithaca. You see, the deal is you say just the opposite. You say, we're from the militia of Beverly Hills, right? And we're printing our own money, okay? And now we have a course that we offer in how to do this. And if you will come around and spend a week here with us, we will show you exactly how it works. We have our own courts. We have our own money. We have our own this. We have our own produce. We have our own that. And we're not trying to secede from anybody. We're just trying to make something work. And we've succeeded, and we'd be happy to show you and your friends how to do it too. To me, that's nothing but good, see? Nothing but good. And I talked with Glover extensively about this, and I said, well, where do you guys stand? I mean, are you creating this money because you sort of have a political point of view? He said, well, we come down on the kind of ecological side of things. He said, yeah. He said, but look, I think that anybody who lives in a community that begins to look at what's going on in their community is going to develop a sense of ecology too about that place. They don't want it destroyed. He said, but that doesn't mean that it has to be formed on that basis. He said, people that have Christian home schools, people that have militias, patriot groups, well, all of that stuff, why can't they have their own money? And why can't they define their own group in any way that they want to? Was his attitude. And I think that it actually creates more of a spirit of generosity and community if you do that, because you begin thinking, let's see now, we have 600 people and everybody's Christian who's using this money. Is that what we want to do? Let's have some discussion about it. Yes, I think, and then somebody says, well, you know, what do we have to be afraid of? We have our own community here. We have our own values. Are you saying that nobody else should be allowed to use this money? Or are we allowed to bring in this farmer out here, you know? Joe Smith, who happens to be whatever, you know? He's from India, and he's growing rice. Well, he's willing to give, you know, he's willing to sell rice and accept the money. Does anybody care? I guess not. And so Joe Smith becomes part of the money system, and everybody finds out he's a good guy, and who cares anyway, and he becomes a part of the community. That's more likely to happen than when you've got this kind of system that we're in now, which is all very impersonal, and you know, and people start looking at each other like, who's that? You know? So I'm making this as a serious point. I believe that one of the basic ways of defeating the New World Order is to make your own money. Make your own money. Okay? I know there'll be some questions, and we'll get to that later. Okay, so let's see if there's anything else here. As I took a whole lot of notes here. Yeah, I want to say one more thing here about this. You know, to me, the great wellsprings of what we call human life on this planet or human society, if you look at the political system, you see that there's certain great traditions that have become distorted and corrupted so that people are always at each other's throats. You know, the conservative tradition, as we now think of conservative, came down with the idea basically of self-sufficiency and independence. That a person could stand on his or her own and be self-sufficient and independent and strong, and that seemed to be a real good idea, especially coming out of autocratic, bad, societies, dictatorial societies. And then we had this other thing called the great liberal tradition, which had as part of its roots the idea of community, that you couldn't divorce an individual entirely from people around them or everybody would go crazy, that something had to happen in terms of community and sharing. And then what we now take to be the corporate community was originally the whole idea of provider, the food, what the community was going to exist on. The original concept was really of providing sustenance. And then you could go to the religious tradition, and that was the spiritual wellspring that, before it became corrupted by being institutionalized in many countries, was something that people could tap into directly, no matter what the denomination was. And now, if you notice, as we come down into the late 20th century, everybody's at war over these things, because it's all gotten to be so petty and so tiny and so corrupt and so absurd, that somebody who's over here talking about community that calls themselves a liberal, and somebody over here who's talking about self-sufficiency who calls himself a conservative, think that they're at war with each other, that they can't talk, that they have nothing in common. When actually, if they were to elevate themselves and become more who they really are and maybe get educated, they could see themselves as kind of speakers for these great different traditions in human history that go together. They're not at war with each other. One can't really exist without the other. You can't have an independent individual without any kind of community at all, because it's the security of the community that creates the time and space for somebody to become truly independent. And you can't have a community where everybody's just whining and, victim-y and all that. It doesn't work. You have to have independent people being part of a community. So part of why we're so bamboozled by this New World Order is because it's created itself, and we've created ourselves in the image of these more petty, distorted versions of these great traditions. And that to develop a true sense of community with each other, such as when you begin printing your own money and you begin actually interacting outside of the Federal Reserve, you begin to see these things emerge. There's community, there's independence, they interact, they move together. And now you have something totally different from the New World Order. Imagine what would happen if in the next 6 months you had 5,000 groups in the United States that started printing their own money. Imagine what would happen. And if all of them would say, we're not exclusionary, that's not our purpose. We're not trying to say we hate everybody. We're trying to survive better. Okay. There's enough from what I've said here to create a revolution against the New World Order and for something that would be a much better world. And if you want to get this tape from the guys here and listen to it over again, make copies for your friends or whatever it is, this is what I'm interested in. Something extremely positive, not something that's just a rejection of the status quo. I've talked here now maybe 5, 6 times. I always feel a very cordial sense of things when I'm here from people, and a very good spirit here. And I know that the forum from various quarters has been under attack, and people have said this and they've said that. I mean, you tell me if I'm blind, okay? You tell me if I'm blind. But my sense is that there's no one who's ever been excluded from this place. That anybody who walks through this door is okay, and that they can sit here and listen and take part, and that this is a place where some information of value is imparted, and there are Ralph and Ann and everybody that's involved, Phil. I mean, I know what it takes to put this kind of thing together. Other people just like to look at it and say, well, they should have 600 people there, or they should get a this, they should do that, they should do this, they should do that. Yeah, well, just try to do this and see what it takes, see how much work is involved to put this together. So, you know, I think there's a bit of a malady out there among a few curmudgeons, you know. It's called forum envy, right? They want to talk in front of 150 people, but they don't know how to do it, see? So they say, well, those people are going to fly, they're horrible. You know, like you would hear, what you hear from them, you would think you walk in here and there's going to be like lizards sitting in the chairs, right, attacking you. And I know there's people in this audience that if we sat down and we started talking ideology, we would have some serious differences. Yes, I understand that. I'm not walking in here blind, believe me. That would be true anywhere I go. And I've made my statement on what I believe in. And so everybody knows where I stand and what I think is important and what I think the Patriot movement ought to move further into. I've made those points tonight. But to defeat the New World Order is to create a different system. That's what I want to leave you with. They have their system. It's a corporate government system. And what they have in store in the 21st century is not very pleasant. The overt control exercised by these corporations will be much more visible. The poverty and the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer will be much more visible. The violence will be much more visible. The attempt to set people against each other by saying those people with their guns are trying to take your property away from you and they have no right to what you have will be much more visible. And this is a point where this becomes all unmanageable, you see, because sure, if you have something and somebody wants to take it away from you with a gun, how are you going to respond? Obviously, how are you going to respond? But on the other hand, if there are too many people without anything because the system has created a level of poverty in which many, 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 many millions of people have nothing and less people have something, then the propaganda becomes so vicious that you have, call it what it is, class war. Those who have versus those who don't have. And as far as the New World Order goes, they love to look at that through that telescope, baby. Look at what's happening. Isn't that nice? Are we far enough away? Yeah, I think we got ourselves bunkered up here good. Okay. And they can put this whole place into ashes. And this whole society and this whole civilization and any sense of propriety and any good ideals and good feelings and good spirit can be smashed for a time, not forever, but for a time behind making the rich richer and the poor poorer and making themselves, these corporations, islands of security in a sea of darkness. And this is where they are going. They think they have it planned. They think they have it figured out, or that they will have it figured out as to how they can split up the world and still keep it running and have what their greed wants. They don't understand. Nobody has ever understood, apparently, who wants that much power, that eventually they lose. Somewhere down the line, they lose. But it could be a horrible thing as to how they lose if they get too much power before they lose. Too much suffering, too much pain, too much sickness, too much violence, too much hatred, too much me, not you. And what we need to do is to create new systems that exist parallel and at the same time to that system and eventually supersede it. And we can do that. We can actually do that. I do believe that. So thank you very much. And I guess we'll just do questions, right? So come up to the mic and let's do it.
I've got the mic back here for the questions.
I think we're not going to take a break, Ralph.
We're going to keep on going with questions, about 3 or 4 questions, and we only have a little bit of tape left, so if we can go real quick.
Have the mic back here for questions.
Yes, question.
I'm first. First
Okay.
of all, those that are asking questions, please let's refrain it to quick questions. If you have information you wish to impart, please wait till afterwards and speak with Mr. Rappoport so everybody else can get their questions in okay. You've said that we are winning. Can you give some specific instances, some, I guess, with respect to the people that are making their own money?
Well, that certainly is victory. I mean, there are people that have set enough of an example now where there's a model to follow, and anybody with half a brain can now have their own money system, and I'll put them in touch with the people that'll show them how to do it. So that in itself is fantastic. I think that, as I've said many times before here, we're winning the information war because, in part, because the Patriot movement has become so outspoken on issues of the day like Ruby Ridge and like Waco and like Oklahoma City that it's thrown a serious monkey wrench into the plans of the propagandists to make people more afraid, make people accept worse laws that restrict their freedom. It's having the opposite effect, and that's a tremendous victory.
Yeah, regarding starting your own money system, how do you put that originally in place? Is it a fiat money? Do you have something back it? How do you begin the original circulation?
Yeah, real good question. I don't have the total answer to that. The Ithaca system, as far as I know, is just simply they print the money, they have a certain set of rules about how much and when. Somebody said to me when I said the other day, he said, well, what about a system backed up by gold? I said, be my guest. I mean, you could do it that way, and I think it would be fantastic.
The first person who prints it seems to be pretty wealthy.
Well, that's right. And what I gather from Glover and Johnny Liberty is that because they're a conscientious people, that has not happened. And there are people satisfied who are using the exchange that it's okay. But you're right, of course. Somebody, could do it in a ridiculous way. But I think that it would be self-limiting because pretty soon, in other words, unlike the Federal Reserve System, right, which is printing their own, and nobody seems to be able to unseat them, if you can say, Fred is the guy, look at how much Fred's got, then people could just say, bye, Fred, we're off your system.
I think the idea of community is very, very important, but I think one of the things I noticed a lot of people don't know and need to know in order to have community is the difference between love and hate, and I wonder what your comment would be.
That's a long subject, but I've learned a lot of personal lessons about this one, I have to say myself, because you can find the enemy and you can go a long way toward defeating the enemy on hate alone, but when you try to build something that's better than what the enemy's got, then you come face to face with yourself. Like if you don't got love, you don't want to build. And I'm afraid that's the self-limiter. In other words, people who don't want to build don't have enough love, and people who don't have enough love don't want to build because it's not important enough to them. And therefore, how do you get more, is a subject for, 12 weeks at least. But that's the bottom line, and you're absolutely right. And to me, that's the big difference. And I've known that within myself because it's been something that I've seen in myself, and I think other people see it in themselves. You get out there and you're like railing against the opposition, and you get to a point finally where you sit down with yourself and you're saying, man, I'm just seething. I gotta tune this down a little bit here. What's happening, you know? And then somehow I think that one of the ways that I was able to stop so much of the seething was by realizing that if you could build something or think about building something that was good, that worked, you could cool out enough to begin to see your real self, which is much different, and you can love a little bit more. Thanks.
John, I'd like to personally thank you for the time and trouble that you take to come up here and educate us in these matters. It's been a real awakening for myself, a lot of my friends and that as well. And
Thank you.
we can't thank you enough. It's been very important. You partially answered my question with the first gentleman in that in setting up this monetary system, if there is not a backing with gold or silver, and we are in essence once again doing another fiat currency, almost like the Feds, how do we begin to reintegrate silver and gold or something intrinsic to make the new currency worth something? How are we doing that? I mean, I understand that the paper money, we are all now operating on the system of that is just the exchange in an already set up barter system. So how do we begin to essentially steal back our real wealth as our past presidents and corporations and the money mongers of the world have done to us, that they have stolen it away and extorted it from us in so many ways and fashions?
Well, here's what I would say. There are those who will say, let's just print it and do a good job and use it as a barter system. And then those who would say, no, this is what we think is important, is to simply make their case. In other words, if you and a few of your friends decided that you would start a money system that you would print backed up by silver and gold, and you set the standards and you made it public and you stuck to it, and you then began to educate people as to why you felt this was a superior way of doing things, then we would be talking about a real free market. I mean, now you would be out there competing, so to speak, with people who say, no, we just need paper that's not corrupted and we can exchange it. And you're saying, no, because, and now I think we have a real forum. That to me would be a real forum, and I see no other way, really. I don't think you're going to do it. I mean, to federalize it again is to make it corrupt. So to start it from the ground up, I think, is the point, and then to just say, look, we've got to make our case to the people that we want to be part of this system as to why this is good, and we have to explain it in such a way that's convincing. And that, to me, would be a wonderful opportunity to take it off the drawing board and actually put it into practice.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for your comments tonight. But the question I have is, we have an agency, a federal agency headed by a 37-year-old young lady called the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a $17 billion Gestapo, in my opinion. How would you handle that, and what would we do about them?
This is one of these areas where I think a lot of people need to sit down and talk with each other who are on different sides of the environmental coin, so to speak. In other words, you can have an agency which is totally corrupt in the sense that they want to federalize huge amounts of land in order to take them out of private hands for no other reason than that the government wants to control all the land in the country as much as they can get. But then you can also have people that have legitimate concerns about what's happening to the environment. To separate these two things out is one of those thorny issues, because the propaganda machine has made this into a very hot button so that people don't want to sit down and talk. So that somebody who's an environmentalist looks at somebody who thinks that all environmentalists are, slugs, and they sit down and nothing's going to happen, see. But take the case of a little town in Pennsylvania where everybody was thrown out of work because corporate America left, and what's left in that town is one factory, and that factory is spewing out the worst toxins, and little kids are getting sick, and people are getting all kinds of disorders and nervous system things are happening. And two mothers decide to speak out in the town, and one of them is raped and the other is beaten up by men who work at the factory. Now we're getting down to the community where it happens and the truth about whatever is going on in that community. And that is the way that the issue needs to be approached. In other words, what is actually happening in the Central Valley of California, in the farmland? If you study it and you begin to look at it, you come to some conclusions about the environment that I think are irrefutable. But you have to give up the ideological baggage to do that. And then you know what to do once you find the answers. And in some places you find out it's a scam, that there's nothing wrong. In other places you find out there's a hell of a lot wrong. It depends on where you go.
Okay, this will be the last question on the tape.
Yes, there's some emerging technologies, the internet, powerful personal computers, but also surveillance technologies. How do you think it will all settle out? Do you think the balance of power might favor the individual a little bit more with some of these technologies?
The internet is definitely a plus, big plus. The Defense Research Agency created it. Pentagon basically created it. It was created so that it would be impossible to shut it down. And so far that's holding because it's so multi-centered and diffuse that it appears that at least right now it cannot be shut down. Of course, we know there are going to be more and more threats to it, and I think some of the biggest threats are going to be corporate. Because when AT&T starts making these $500 internet machines that you can buy that aren't even computers, they are also going to try to guide you in very friendly ways as to where to go on the internet. You can shop over here, right? This is where they want to take you. And if half of America gets bamboozled in on it, then they don't even have to pass any laws. It's exactly how the corporate people work, and they're going to try that among other strategies. But yes, I think things are definitely, that's a real good thing. We've got our boycott information up on a website, and we're getting that stuff all over the world now, so it's a definite plus. Yes, I am. I can't hear you.
All right. I said, have you ever heard of the Constitution of the United States?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever heard of antitrust laws?
Yes, I have.
Well, what's happened to them? I mean, what you're preaching is anarchy, sir.
No, I'm not. Actually, I'm not. If the antitrust laws were followed, in other words, if the politicians who were supposed to be enforcing those laws and the courts and everything really were doing their job, I agree. What I tried to spell out earlier was how that system got corrupted. That what the colonists originally wanted was not anarchy. I don't know whether you heard the beginning of this, but since all corporations had to be chartered by the state, each state could yank the charter of a corporation, that was the original plan that the founding fathers, so to speak, set up, and the states went along with it. It was only because the court system was corrupted that in 1886 the corporation got the right to be called a person, and then everything went haywire. So actually you can have a very orderly system of life in this country without that kind of multinational corporate corruption.
John, in response with what that fellow was trying to say in regards to the Sherman antitrust laws, I'd made mention several times on the various radio shows in response to the oil and gasoline situation. In Gary Kaw's book, En Route to Global Occupation, there's a page in there that speaks about in 1886, John D. Rockefeller Sr. was processing 90% of all the crude oil in this country and began his global expansion. In 1911, he was hit with the Sherman antitrust suit, was told to divest Standard Oil Trust. It was divided up into 33 small oil companies, all of which he owned 25% of stock in, and in less than 10 years, he owned it all back under various names and other trusts, and he did this by way of ownership of the banks and through the voting capability of the trusts in those banks is how he did it. Power, money, and his greed.
Thank you. One more thing, and then I'm going to quit here. I just want to remind you again, Rick Santee is back there, and if you want to get any information on the boycott, you can from him. And also, if you are interested in something for your health that, I mean, I could go on for an hour on how this has blown my mind, check out Coral Calcium back there. We got some water with some of it in. You can have a little drink. I think we got some left. And thank you, folks. It's always great to see you.